At dinner, my husband smiled and said, "Let's be brutally honest tonight." On the night of my 27th birthday, I thought I was walking into a celebration. What I walked into instead was the moment that split my family in two. We were seated at a white linen table in one of those restaurants where the menus don't list prices, and the waiters glide silently like shadows. My parents insisted on this place. They said I deserved something special. I suspected it was more about appearances, but I didn't argue. I had just been laid off from my design job, and every dollar in my checking account felt like it had teeth. I told myself, smile, make it through dinner, pretend everything is fine. My father wore a tailored suit with cufflinks that glinted like tiny knives. My mother's necklace sparkled so brightly under the chandelier, it almost mocked me. They looked like people untouched by stress, while I sat there in my only decent black dress, the one I also wore to job interviews and funerals. We traded shallow conversation. My dad asked about the job hunt, but when I admitted how rough it had been, he quickly steered the talk back to some movie he and mom had seen. It felt rehearsed, like they'd agreed beforehand not to let me bring the mood down. Then came the gifts. A designer wallet and a scarf. Lovely, but strange. They didn't match the lavish setting. I thanked them anyway, even as my stomach tightened. The same people who had refused to help me with a security deposit 4 years ago were now handing me luxury accessories I didn't need. I was halfway through my entree when the air in the restaurant shifted. Diners turned their heads. Waiters straightened. I didn't need to look to know why there was only one person in my family who could command a room like that by simply existing. My grandfather, Walter Harrington. At 82, he was still tall, silver-haired, with a presence that made silence fall around him. People whispered his name the way others might whisper a warning. Real estate mogul, self-made billionaire. My father once told me Walter could build a tower in the desert if he wanted, because people trusted his vision even when they didn't like him. He approached our table with Jennifer, his assistant hovering nearby with her ever-present tablet. My parents froze. My father shot up so fast, his water glass almost toppled. His voice was high nervous. "Walter, we didn't think you'd make it." My grandfather ignored him. Instead, he turned to me. His stern expression softened. "Happy birthday, Caitlin," he said, kissing my cheek. His cologne cedar and leather was familiar steady. 27. Hard to believe. Something in me loosened. He remembered. He was rarely at family events, but when he did show up, he saw me. Not the facade, not the performance, me. He sat beside me, his gaze sharp and assessing. "I wanted to check on you," he said. "Jennifer tells me your portfolio's numbers look solid. The trust should be performing well even in this market." My fork clattered against my plate. What? Your investment portfolio. The trust established when you were born. By now, everything should be under your control. He said it like it was obvious, like we were discussing the weather. The blood drained from my face. I looked at my parents. My mother's knuckles whitened around her fork. My father's eyes darted anywhere but mine. "I don't have a trust fund," I said quietly. For a split second, I thought maybe Walter would laugh, say he misspoke. But instead, something in his eyes hardened. "Of course you do. $5 million at the start. Plus growth. Managed by your parents until your 25th birthday, when the assets were to transfer. And the apartment?" He paused, tilting his head. "Is it comfortable?" My chest tightened. "What apartment?" The table went silent. My grandfather's gaze slid slowly to my parents. His voice dropped to a calm, deadly register. "You didn't tell her." I heard myself whisper, "What apartment again?" as if repeating the question might make it make sense. The restaurant around us blurred, but the weight in the room grew heavier. My mother's face was pale, lips trembling. My father reached for his glass like a man reaching for cover. Walter didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The 2-bedroom unit in Lakeside Tower. Purchased 2 years ago. A 25th birthday present. Security Lake views. And you don't know about it. I shook my head slowly. My mind spun with fragments, years of scraping by. Student loans, nights I skipped dinner so rent would clear, suddenly colliding with the image of an empty luxury apartment with my name on it. My grandfather turned back to my parents, his words slicing through the silence. "Then tell me, where did the money go?" I swear the clinking of silverware around us stopped entirely. Other diners pretended not to stare, but their eyes flicked toward us, drawn by the tension that hummed like a live wire. My father finally spoke, his voice unsteady. "Walter, there's been a misunderstanding." My grandfather didn't blink. "Explain it." My father stammered. Walter cut him off with the kind of icy composure that made grown men shrink. "You have one chance to make me believe you." Jennifer had already stepped aside, murmuring into her phone, probably summoning lawyers. My mother tried to reach across the table for my hand. Her skin looked fragile, her nails manicured to perfection, but I pulled away before she touched me. The betrayal pressed down on me like a weight I couldn't breathe under. Years of their lectures struggle builds character. You need to learn responsibility. We can't always rescue you. Suddenly felt like a sick joke. I wanted to scream. Instead, I sat frozen, my pulse roaring in my ears. That was the night everything I thought I knew about my family cracked open. And it all started with one simple question. "So how's the apartment?" If you want to understand why my grandfather's words shattered me so completely, you need to know how I had been living up until that night. I thought I was independent. I thought I was building a life through sheer determination. Now I realize I was surviving on scraps while millions sat hidden behind closed doors. After graduating from art school, I had nearly $70,000 in student loans. My parents congratulated me at the ceremony, then told me bluntly, "We're proud, but don't expect us to bail you out. Struggle builds character." Character. That was their favorite word. A shield for their refusal to help. So I learned to live small. I moved into a cramped 2-bedroom in Chicago with my best friend Olivia. Rent devoured half my paycheck from the design agency. We filled our apartment with mismatched furniture, hand-me-downs, thrift store rescues, even things we found on sidewalks. To outsiders, it looked quirky. To me, it was survival disguised as style. There were nights when dinner was instant ramen with a fried egg if I felt fancy. I rationed mascara, stretched paychecks, and calculated how many weeks I could survive if I skipped social outings. Meanwhile, my parents showed off their remodeled kitchen with marble counters and boasted about vacations in Aruba. I didn't envy them, at least I told myself I didn't. They had worked hard, and I believed I needed to do the same. But sometimes late at night, I'd lie awake wondering why their definition of family never seemed to include helping me. When I asked once for a little help with a deposit on my first apartment, my dad laughed. "Caitlin, you'll appreciate it more if you earn it yourself." I nodded like a dutiful daughter. Then I went home and cried in the bathroom so Olivia wouldn't hear me. Looking back, I see the red flags. The way they shut down any talk about finances when I was around. The hushed conversations that ended when I walked into the room. The way they always deflected when Grandpa's name came up. But I never questioned it too deeply. I thought my parents were just private. I thought their coldness was discipline, not deception. Meanwhile, my cousin Natalie flaunted her trust fund openly. Designer handbags, constant travel, endless posts from Dubai, Paris, Tokyo. I rolled my eyes, told myself I was better for working hard while she coasted. I didn't know that my trust, the one meant to secure my future, was larger than hers. That I wasn't struggling out of necessity, but out of betrayal. One memory still haunts me. Last winter, my agency lost its biggest client. I was laid off with 4 others. I sat in my boss's office clutching a cardboard box of my things trying to act brave while my insides collapsed. I had maybe 2 months savings. Rent was due in weeks. That night, I applied for food stamps. I remember staring at the application, my pride burning, thinking, how did it come to this? And the entire time, there was an apartment in my name, a trust account with millions. My parents knew, and they let me beg the state for help instead. I can't stop replaying it, my dad in his new Mercedes, my mom showing off a diamond tennis bracelet, and me counting coins at a laundromat, pretending it was part of the hustle. When Grandpa asked about the apartment, it was like the universe had yanked the blindfold off. Suddenly, every struggle, every night of panic, every lecture about building character reeked of cruelty. They weren't teaching me resilience. They were teaching me how to drown while they lounged by the pool I unknowingly paid for. Ask yourself this: what would you do if you found out the people you trusted most had forced you to suffer just so they could live in comfort? Would you forgive them, or would you finally let the anger consume you? That was the question burning in me as I sat in that restaurant staring at my parents' pale faces, wondering how many lies they told to keep their secrets safe. And deep down, I knew this wasn't just about money. It was about betrayal so sharp it cut into the marrow of who I thought I was. The private dining room smelled faintly of polish and smoke, as if even the walls were bracing for what was about to be exposed. Walter sat at the head of the table, his expression carved in stone. I sat beside him, my pulse hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. Across from me, my parents looked like strangers, nervous, pale, suddenly small in their tailored clothes. Stanley, my grandfather's attorney, opened his leather briefcase with the calm precision of a man about to detonate a bomb. He placed a stack of documents on the table and began to speak in measured tones. When Caitlin was born, a trust was established in her name. $5 million initially with provisions for growth, managed by her parents until she turned 25, at which point full control would transfer to her. The words sliced through me. I tried to swallow, but my mouth was dry. $5 million, a number so massive it felt absurd. I turned to my parents, waiting for them to say something, anything. But they just sat there, their eyes glued to the documents like school children caught cheating. Stanley continued, "The trust stipulates that funds could be used prior to age 25 for Caitlin's education, health, and welfare with proper documentation. College tuition was authorized. Beyond that, expenditures were meant to be minimal." He paused, tapping the papers with one finger. "Instead, what we see here is a pattern of systematic withdrawals. Significant sums moved into accounts belonging to Harold and Diane." My father cleared his throat. "Walter, there's been a misunderstanding." Walter's gaze was ice. "A misunderstanding is when someone orders the wrong wine. This is theft." My mother leaned forward, tears already spilling down her cheeks. "Please, Dad, don't say that. We were only trying to what Walter's voice cracked like a whip. To live in a 5-bedroom house, to buy cars and jewelry, to parade on vacations while your daughter ate ramen and begged for rent money." I flinched. Not at his anger, but at the truth in it. My father's face hardened, his voice rising. "You don't understand? We were keeping up appearances. Do you know what it's like in our circles? The pressure, the expectations?" Walter leaned forward, his eyes burning. "Do you know what it's like to build an empire from nothing, Harold? I worked my hands raw to give this family security. And you siphoned it away for appearances." Silence. My mother sobbed quietly, her shoulders shaking. My father stared at the table as though if he just kept his eyes down, none of this would be happening. I couldn't stay silent anymore. All those years, I whispered, my voice trembling. "But Sharp, you let me believe struggle was my destiny. You watched me cry over bills. You saw me work 2 jobs, come home exhausted, and you told me it was good for me. My mother reached across the table, but I pulled back. Sweetheart, we always meant to pay it back. I laughed, the sound hollow and jagged. Pay it back? You drained millions. Do you have any idea what that could have done for me? For my future, Stanley cleared his throat gently. As of the most recent statement, the trust should be worth approximately $8.3 million factoring in growth. However, preliminary reviews suggest that only $300,000 remains. The number hit me like a physical blow. From millions to scraps. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. My vision blurred. $8 million stolen while I scraped by with pennies. Walter sat back, his jaw tight, his hand resting heavy on mine. Caitlin, this isn't your burden to carry. They'll answer for it. But it was my burden. Because every unpaid bill, every humiliating lecture, every cold night spent wondering if I'd make rent, had been built on their lie. My father finally spoke again, quieter now. We never wanted to hurt you. We just lost control. Lost control. As if my life had been a steering wheel, they casually let go of sending me crashing while they enjoyed the ride. In that moment, something inside me shifted. The girl who made excuses for her parents, who believed their lessons about character and struggle, began to die. And in her place, a harder, sharper version of me was being born, one who would no longer swallow lies to keep the family peace. Ask yourself, if the people who raised you revealed they'd stolen your entire future, could you ever look at them the same way again? I couldn't. The room had gone deathly still, the air so heavy, it felt like even the chandeliers were listening. Walter didn't raise his voice, but every syllable struck like a gavel. Jennifer, he said to his assistant, called Detective Ramirez. Financial Crimes Unit. Tell him we'll need immediate intervention. My mother gasped. No, please, Dad. You can't. This is family business. Walter's jaw tightened. Family business doesn't involve stealing millions from your own daughter. That's criminal. The word echoed in my skull. Criminal. I'd never associated it with my parents before. Annoying, controlling, hypocritical, yes, but thieves? Criminals. I looked at them, really looked, and saw it in their downcast eyes. Guilt. Shame. And beneath that, a flicker of fear. Not fear of losing me. Fear of losing their lifestyle. My father tried to salvage what little dignity he thought he had left. Walter, please, there's no need to involve outsiders. We can fix this. We'll pay it back. Walter leaned back, studying him with the cold scrutiny of a man who had negotiated billion-dollar deals with what you've already burned through nearly everything. Your house bought with her money, the Florida property. Her money. The cars in your driveway, the vacations, the jewelry, every bit of it stolen. My hand shook under the table. Stolen. The word clung to me like smoke. I remembered the winter I nearly lost heat in my apartment because I couldn't cover the bill. I had called my mom, my voice breaking, asking if she could lend me just $200 until payday. She told me gently, almost sweetly, it's better you learn to manage on your own, honey. That's how you build resilience. Meanwhile, the heat in their mansion never went off. Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. You let me beg, I said quietly, my voice cutting sharper than if I'd screamed. You let me sit in the dark, crying, thinking I was weak. You called it resilience, but it was cruelty. And you knew it. My father tried to meet my eyes, but I stared him down until he looked away. My mother just sobbed harder, repeating, we were going to pay it back. We were. You just chose yourselves over me, I snapped. The words spilled before I could stop them. Years of swallowed hurt, sleepless nights, and humiliations broke through at once. You watched me sacrifice everything while you lived off money meant for me. You liked watching me struggle because it made you feel superior. You let me drown while you sipped cocktails by the pool I unknowingly paid for. For a second, neither of them said a word. And then finally, my father whispered the ugliest truth of all. We needed it more than you did. The sentence lodged in me like a knife. Needed it more than me. Walter slammed his fist on the table, the sound reverberating like thunder. Enough. Stanley, freeze every asset immediately. Jennifer, make sure they can't touch a dime without my authorization. My mother's sobs turned to frantic pleading. Dad, please don't do this. We'll lose everything. Walter's voice was colder than I'd ever heard it. You already lost everything the moment you betrayed your daughter. I sat in silence, numb. The walls of my reality were collapsing, and the people who built them were the very ones who claimed to love me most. And yet, as I looked at them crumbling under the weight of exposure, part of me wondered, was it justice I wanted or revenge? Because in that moment, I wasn't sure I could tell the difference. The night after the confrontation, I sat on my couch in the dark, unable to move. Olivia hovered in the kitchen, pretending to scroll her phone, giving me space, but staying close. I think she knew if she left me alone, I might shatter into pieces too small to put back together. My phone buzzed relentlessly, calls, texts, voicemails from my parents. I didn't answer. Each vibration felt like a ghost, clawing at me, begging to be let back in. And then came the whispers. The first sign was a text from a friend at work. Hey, is everything okay? Just saw something online about your family. My stomach dropped. Against my better judgment, I opened Facebook, and there it was. A local business blog had posted an article, Family Feud in the Harrington Dynasty. The details were vague, something about mismanagement of trust assets and legal disputes within one of the Midwest's wealthiest families. They hadn't named me, but they didn't need to. Everyone in our circles could connect the dots. By morning, the calls had shifted, not just from my parents, but from extended family. Cousins, uncles, people who hadn't spoken to me in years suddenly wanted my side of the story. My father's brother left me a voicemail, dripping with accusation. Caitlin, don't you think you're being dramatic? Family money is complicated. Airing this out will ruin us all. Ruin us all. As if I hadn't already been ruined for years. I ignored them all, but the shame seeped in anyway. Walking into a cafe, I felt eyes on me. Were they actually staring? Or was it paranoia? Every laugh behind me sounded like mockery. Every hushed tone could have been her parents stole her trust fund. And then Maggie happened. My cousin Natalie's older sister, always the gossip, always the opportunist. She posted a carefully worded reflection about family and money on Instagram, accompanied by a picture of her sipping champagne in Paris. Sometimes, she wrote, envy makes people exaggerate. We should remember that parents sacrifice so much for us, and it's easy to judge when you don't know the full story. She never mentioned me by name. She didn't have to. The comments exploded with sympathy for her and thinly veiled jabs at me. So sad when kids turn against their parents. Greed makes people ungrateful. Stay strong, Maggie. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. Strangers were painting me as the villain, the spoiled child trying to destroy her own family. They didn't know the truth. They didn't see the bills. I cried over the food stamps, the panic attacks. They just saw the curated lie my relatives were spinning. I wanted to scream. I wanted to write a post of my own, expose every detail, every stolen dollar, every sleepless night. But then I imagined the backlash, the twisting of my words, the smug comments calling me unstable. So I stayed silent. And silence, I realized, can feel like suffocation. One evening, as I sat staring blankly at the ceiling, Olivia finally said, "You can't keep carrying this alone. Either tell your story or let Walter handle it. But don't let them bury you alive with their lies." Her words lodged deep. Because she was right, silence was killing me. But the thought of speaking, of opening myself to the storm, was almost worse. Ask yourself this: if the truth would destroy your parents, but silence would destroy you, what would you choose? That was the choice that stalked me through every sleepless night as the outside world began to circle like vultures. When money is involved, family doesn't stay family for long. It turns into factions, whisper campaigns, quiet alliances built over phone calls at midnight. That's what happened next. My father's side came down hard against me. To them, Walter was the tyrant and I was his puppet. They flooded my inbox with messages dripping in condescension. "Sweetheart, you don't understand finance. Your parents didn't steal. They just borrowed." Another cousin sneered. "Would you rather they had let the family lose everything? You should be grateful for being robbed blind, for losing years of my life to unnecessary struggle." On my mother's side, the silence was worse. Her sister, Aunt Ruth, called me once. Her voice was shaky. "I'm so sorry for what she did, but she's still my sister." That was all. After that, nothing. Not support, not condemnation, just absence. But the most surprising voice came from Natalie, the cousin I'd always envied. She showed up at my apartment one afternoon, her designer coat a little too heavy for the weather, her eyes strangely tired. "I need to talk," she said, stepping inside before I could answer. We sat on my worn couch, the one with springs that poked if you sat in the wrong spot. She didn't complain. She just looked at me with something I'd never seen from her before: honesty. "I used to wonder why your parents lived so much better than mine," she admitted. "We all got trusts, but mine was modest. Yours was the biggest. I always assumed you were pretending to be broke for attention. Turns out I was jealous of nothing." Her voice cracked. "I hated you sometimes. And you were the one being robbed all along." Hearing that twisted something in me. For years I had resented her privilege, not knowing she had secretly resented me for what she thought I had. The irony was cruel. That day, Natalie became an ally. She told me stories about overhearing whispers at family parties, her suspicions that something wasn't right. She admitted she envied the closeness I seemed to have with my parents, while I had envied her financial security. We had both been living illusions. Meanwhile, my parents kept calling. Their messages shifted from denial to bargaining, then to begging. "Caitlin, think about the bigger picture. Don't drag the family name through the mud. We'll fix it. Please just talk to us." But every voicemail felt like poison. I could hear their fear, not of losing me, but of losing status. Walter's team uncovered more details by the day. Properties accounts, business investments that had all been funded by my trust. Some successful, most not. Every revelation was another cut. One night, staring at the spreadsheets Jennifer sent over, I whispered out loud, "They stole my 20s. Because that's what it was. They didn't just steal money. They stole time, years of fear of hunger, of believing I was less than I was. And no repayment plan could give that back. I began to understand that the family wasn't just dividing between me and my parents. It was dividing between truth and lies. And the scariest part, I wasn't sure which side had more people. If there's one thing my parents were always good at, it was performance. They knew how to craft an image, how to smile for the cameras, how to dress their wounds in pearls and silk so no one looked too closely. So when the truth started leaking into whispers online, they fought back not with honesty, but with narrative. First came a Facebook post from my mother, the kind written in syrupy tones that make outsiders swoon and insiders gag. Families go through difficult seasons. We've all made sacrifices, and sometimes those sacrifices are misunderstood. We ask for privacy and compassion during this time. Sacrifices. She called draining my trust a sacrifice. Then my father did an interview with a local business friend who ran a podcast. His voice carried the same authority he used to scold me as a child. "Our daughter doesn't understand the complexities of finance. She thinks in black and white, but real life is gray. We managed things as best we could to protect her long term. Protect me. by forcing me into food stamps while they renovated their pool. The comments were predictable. Half the listeners applauded their honesty. The other half smelled blood. Words like embezzlement and fraud started circulating. Some even tagged me, demanding I set the record straight. But setting the record straight wasn't simple. It meant dragging my own family skeletons into the spotlight. It meant reliving every betrayal in front of an audience hungry for spectacle. And worse, it meant giving my parents more chances to twist my words. So I stayed quiet. But silence, I was learning, is dangerous. It lets liars shout unchallenged. The breaking point came when a coworker approached me at the office, lowering her voice like she was delivering gossip about a celebrity. "Hey, I heard your parents are being unfairly attacked. Must be hard on you. Unfairly attacked." I excused myself, locked myself in the bathroom, and stared at my reflection. My hands trembled against the sink. This wasn't just about stolen money anymore. It was about stolen truth. That night, Walter called. His voice was steady the way it always was when he wanted me to listen carefully. "They will paint themselves as victims, Caitlin. That's what people who betray do. They rewrite the story, so they're the wounded ones. The question is, are you ready to claim your story back?" I didn't answer right away. Because claiming it back meant going to war. Against my parents. Against the carefully constructed facade they'd maintained for decades. Against a family name that still carried weight in this city. I stared at the ceiling long after the call ended, the silence pressing in around me. Ask yourself if speaking the truth meant burning every bridge to the people who raised you. Would you do it? I still didn't know. The day the story hit the Chicago Tribune, everything shifted. Not a gossip blog. Not whispers on Facebook. A full-page article, "A Billionaire's Heiress Cut Off," by parents' allegations of missing trust fund. My name was in print. My photograph, one I'd never agreed to, was plastered next to a shot of my parents outside a courthouse, looking solemn and noble, as if they were martyrs enduring some cruel injustice. The article quoted their lawyer extensively. Words like miscommunication, financial mismanagement, family misunderstanding. Softened terms that avoided the ugliness of theft or fraud. But buried halfway through the article was a single line from Walter. "My granddaughter has been wronged, and the evidence will speak for itself." The evidence. That word cracked something open inside me. Because here's the truth. I wasn't ready to be anyone's victim. I wasn't ready to let my parents weaponize public sympathy while I hid in the shadows, gnawing on my anger like stale bread. But choosing to speak meant stepping out into the light, knowing that once I did, I couldn't retreat. When the reporter called, I almost ignored it. My thumb hovered over decline like a safety net. But then I remembered the coworker's pitying whisper. The podcast lies. My mother's post about sacrifice. I answered. "I'm Caitlin," I said, my voice trembling at first, then solidifying. "And yes, I have something to say." We met the next afternoon at a cafe near my office. I came armed with documents. Walter's lawyers had already prepared copies of the trust agreement statements showing the missing millions emails, proving my parents knew exactly what they were doing. But what I gave the reporter that couldn't be found in paperwork was my story. How I had begged my parents for help with rent, only to be told to build character. How I had skipped meals, worked 2 jobs, borrowed money from friends while they vacationed in Europe. How they let me drown, knowing full well I was supposed to have a lifeline. By the end, the reporter's hands shook slightly as he closed his notebook. This changes everything. That night, when the follow-up article went live, the headline was "Different Daughter Accuses Parents of Embezzling $8 million Trust Fund." No more euphemisms. And for the first time in months, I felt the smallest flicker of power return to me. Of course, my parents retaliated. They went on television crying about betrayal, about how I'd been brainwashed by Walter. My mother dabbed her eyes with a silk handkerchief as she said, "She's our only child. We love her. We'd never hurt her." But their crocodile tears couldn't erase the documents or the public's growing fury. Suddenly, silence was no longer my prison. It was theirs. Ask yourself, when your own parents turn the world against you, is the only way to survive to turn the world against them? That was the side I chose. And once chosen, there was no going back. The first hearing was nothing like the television dramas. No gavel slamming, no shouting matches, just the sterile hum of fluorescent lights and the faint scratching of lawyers' pens on yellow legal pads. But underneath that quiet surface, I could feel the ground cracking. My parents sat across from me in the courtroom. My mother wore muted gray, her once polished nails bitten down to the quick. My father's suit looked like it had been pulled hastily from the back of a closet, wrinkled out of place. They looked smaller than I remembered, fragile almost. But I knew better. Fragile people don't steal $8 million. Fragile people don't rent out an apartment meant for their daughter while she eats ramen in a dim kitchen. Their lawyer stood to speak first. "Your Honor, my clients admit there were financial oversights. They regret any pain caused. But this is a family matter. Surely it can be resolved without tearing this family apart. Oversights." That word nearly made me laugh. Was it an oversight when they wired $400,000 to a real estate deal in Florida under their names? An oversight when they bought my mother's diamond necklace while I sold artwork on Etsy just to pay utilities? Walter's attorney, Stanley, didn't bother with theatrics. He simply laid out the documents. The trust agreement with my name in bold, the bank records, the transfers, the property deeds. Each page landed with the weight of a hammer, even without the sound. When the judge glanced at me, I spoke. My voice cracked at first, but then the anger carried me. "Your Honor, this isn't about money. This is about being lied to my entire life. It's about being told struggle builds character while my parents built swimming pools with my inheritance. My father shifted uncomfortably. My mother stared at the floor. The judge finally looked at them. You were entrusted to safeguard your daughter's future. Instead, you used it to enrich yourselves. This goes beyond poor management. It is a profound breach of duty. For once, they had no words. As the hearing adjourned, I caught my mother's eyes. For just a moment, I saw something there. Not remorse, not even shame, but calculation. Like a gambler down to her last chip already searching for the next game. And that's when I understood this wasn't just a courtroom battle. This was a war over the very definition of family. Ask yourself, when blood betrays you, is it still family? Or does family end the moment trust dies? That question hung in my chest as we left the courthouse heavier than any verdict. The days after the hearing felt like living inside a furnace. Everyone in the family had an opinion, and none of them were quiet about it. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Aunts and uncles called to say I was brave for speaking up. Cousins texted to say they couldn't believe what my parents had done. But just as many voices whispered the opposite, that I had humiliated my own parents, dragged our family name into court, made private wounds public. One message cut deeper than the rest. Blood is blood. Money comes and goes. Why destroy them like this? Destroy them. The irony nearly made me choke. Had they not destroyed me first? I scrolled through old photos one night, searching for proof that my family had once been whole. Vacations at the lake, Christmas mornings. My father teaching me to ride a bike. My mother's hand steadying me before a piano recital. Those people, the ones in the photos, didn't exist anymore. Or maybe they never had. Maybe those smiles were masks even then. Walter called me one evening. His voice was steady, but there was steel underneath. Caitlin, he said, don't mistake forgiveness for weakness. If you choose to show mercy, it must be on your terms, not theirs. I asked him if he thought I was cruel for letting it go this far. Cruel, he chuckled bitterly. No, my dear. Cruelty is watching your daughter drown while you stand on the dock sipping champagne. What you've done is refuse to drown quietly. Still, the choice was mine to make. My parents sent letter after letter, some begging, some justifying, some pretending nothing had ever happened, as if time could stitch this wound closed. One letter ended with, one day, when you have children of your own, you'll understand. Understand what? That it's acceptable to rob your child blind because you think they'll survive it. I sat with that question for hours, the ink from the letter smudged by my fingertips. And then came the final confrontation, a family dinner called, not by me, not by Walter, but by my cousin Natalie. She insisted that everyone gather, that we couldn't keep living in fragments of truth and lies. I didn't want to go, but I did. And that night, I walked into a room that would decide whether my parents were still my family or if I was ready to burn those ashes to the wind forever. The restaurant Natalie chose was quiet, almost too quiet. A private room with heavy curtains, the kind that muffled every sound as if the walls themselves didn't want to hear what was about to happen. My parents were already seated when I arrived. My father's tie was gone, his shirt collar wilted like a man who'd aged 20 years in 6 months. My mother's hair, once perfectly styled, hung limp against her face. For the first time, they looked ordinary. And maybe that was the cruelest punishment of all, to be stripped of the illusion of power they had clung to. Walter sat beside me, cane resting against his chair, his presence a fortress. Natalie, bless her stubbornness, sat in the middle, like a referee who knew the match would never end cleanly. My mother was the first to speak. Caitlin, we've lost everything. The house, the cars, our friends, all gone. Isn't that punishment enough? I didn't answer. I let the silence sit heavy between us. My father leaned forward, desperation etched across his face. We're your parents. We made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but prison public shame. Do you really want that on your conscience? Their words coiled around me like smoke, tempting me to inhale, to surrender to the easy comfort of forgetting. But then I remembered ramen dinners, eviction notices taped to my door, the nights I cried myself to sleep believing poverty was my destiny, while they vacationed in luxury villas bought with my money. I finally spoke. My voice was calm, colder than I expected. You want to know if I'll forgive you? Forgiveness isn't something you demand like a refund. It's something you earn. And right now, you've earned nothing. My mother's lip trembled. My father's eyes darted to Walter, as if begging him to intervene. But Walter stayed silent, his gaze fixed on me, letting me hold the blade. I won't send you to prison, I continued. Not because you don't deserve it, but because I refuse to let you chain me to this story forever. I'll recover what can be recovered. I'll rebuild. But don't mistake that for reconciliation. Whatever we had as a family died the moment you chose greed over me. The words hung in the air like a verdict. My mother whispered, so that's it, you're cutting us off. I looked at her, at the woman who once tucked me in at night and later robbed me blind. No, I said softly, you cut yourselves off. I'm just finally admitting it. The dinner ended without dessert, without hugs, without promises. Just the cold scrape of chairs against the floor and the sound of finality. As I stepped outside into the night air, Walter's hand rested briefly on my shoulder. You did what they could never do, he murmured. You told the truth. And in that moment, I realized the story wasn't about money, not really. It was about loyalty, trust, and the unbearable question that still lingers. When blood betrays you, do you owe it anything at all? I don't have the answer. Maybe I never will. But I know this much, I walked away free. And sometimes that has to be enough. Thanks for watching. Your likes, comments, and subs keep these stories coming. Take care of your peace and your truth.